What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Last Word Sports Podcast. I'm your host tonight, Scott Gebertz, and we're going to be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys and their matchup this Sunday to decide who wins the NFC East. So, as you can probably tell, I'm a pretty big Giants fan, and it pains me to see my 3-11 G-men eliminated from the playoffs so early this season, especially with such a weak competition in the division. But, in an ideal world, both the Cowboys and Eagles could lose and miss the playoffs, a double loss, but that's not going to happen. One of these teams is going to come out with a win, or at least they'll tie, and Dallas will win with the tiebreaker. So, we're going to take you through our picks for who we think is going to win Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday. So, I'm going to start off with some of the stats. The Cowboys this season are averaging 27 points per game and 434 yards per game on offense. Those are the fifth best and first best numbers in the league, and they're also passing for 300 yards per game and rushing for 134 yards per game, the second best and sixth best numbers in the league. Defensively, the Cowboys aren't as good, but they're still a pretty strong team. They're allowing 20.6 points per game, the 12th best number in the league, 220 passing yards per game, the 8th best number in the league, 130.6 rushing yards per game, the 12th best number in the league, and 323.6 yards per game total, the 7th best number in the league. Moving on to the Eagles are a little bit worse statistically, but they're still all right. Offensively, the Eagles are averaging 23.9 points per game, the 12th best number in the league, 352.9 yards per game, the 16th best number in the league, 231.5 passing yards per game, the 16th number in the league, and 121.4 rushing yards per game, the 11th best number in the league. On the defensive side of the ball, Philly is allowing 23.4 points per game, the 16th best number in the league, 328.5 yards per game, the 9th best number in the league, and 238.1 passing yards per game, which is the 18th best number in the league. Now, here's actually Philly's one strong point. Probably the best part of their statistics and one of the best parts of their team is that they're allowing 90.4 rushing yards per game, the third best number in the league. For the Cowboys, their strong point is their passing attack on offense. They're second in the league in passing yards per game, and they have a very balanced offense too because they're sixth in the league in rushing yards per game. So Cowboys' offense is their strong point, and Philly's run D is their forte. Now, I'm going to take you through the last three games that each of these teams have played. So the Cowboys, 3 weeks ago, played the Buffalo Bills at home on Thanksgiving, and they lost 26-15. This was a very bad loss, actually. Buffalo is a pretty good team. They're 10-4. They're going to make the playoffs. But the Cowboys were down, I want to say, 26-7 at some point in this game. They were really just, run out of their own home. And Buffalo just demolished them. The Cowboys, they had it kind of close in the first half and just fell apart. Dak didn't look that good. Zeke couldn't get going, and their defense couldn't stop Josh Allen as a running quarterback. Then the next week, they played on Thursday Night Football at Chicago, lost 31-24. Another bad loss. Mitchell Trubisky he scored 4 total touchdowns against them, which, how do you let Mitch Trubisky score 4 touchdowns on you? I mean, come on, man. The guy's terrible. And the Cowboys were actually losing 31-14 in the fourth quarter of this game, and then, tightened up the deficit late in the game, but still, they couldn't come back and win. This was a pretty bad loss. And then, out of the blue, after a 3-game losing streak, the Cowboys played the Los Angeles Rams in Jerry World last week and smacked them 44-21. And this is super shocking because the Rams coming into this game were really hot. The Rams had just beaten the Seattle Seahawks, the number 1 seed in the NFC, 28-12. Their defense had held Seattle to only 6 points. And somehow, the Cowboys just smacked the Rams. So, the Cowboys have been very inconsistent this year. I tell you that they aren't hot going into this game after losing 3 of their last 4, but they could have turned things around last week with a huge victory over the Rams, so it's hard to tell. For the Eagles last 3 games have been against some of the worst teams in the NFL. The Eagles had one of the easiest home stretches, end of the year path to the playoffs out of any team in the NFL this season. And somehow they managed to screw this up and lose a game to the Miami Dolphins, who are 3-11. The Dolphins are terrible, and they lost at Miami 31-37. In this game, the Dolphins punter threw a touchdown to their kicker, or vice versa, something like that. But the point is, how do you lose to Miami, man? The Eagles totally blew an opportunity to seize the division lead. Fortunately, the last 2 weeks, the Eagles managed to eke out wins against the Giants and the Redskins. Again, two terrible teams. Both of them are 3-11 as well. Philly and Dallas are both 7-7. So not the most impressive wins, but they still are wins, and Philly's established themselves in the division race. Now, the game against the Giants, they were actually down 17-3 in this game to my Eli Manning-led Giants, who are just a terrible team. It was really embarrassing, and the Eagles showed a lot of life. It was very impressive that they came back to win this game 23-17 in overtime, but at the same time, it's very concerning that they were down 17-3 to the Giants in the first place. And then last week against Washington, they won 37-27. Although the score indicates a 10-point victory, this was actually a much closer game than that, and again, it was kind of concerning. Dwayne Haskins, who has been terrible all season long, shredded the Eagles secondary. He had a great game, and Washington was actually winning this game 27-24 with about 40 seconds left before Carson went through a go-ahead touchdown pass to put the Eagles up 31-27, and then at the end of the game, there was like a lateral, fake play that Washington tried to do that Philly just ran back for a touchdown to make, and that made it look like they won by a solid margin. Really, it was a very close game. So the Cowboys and the Eagles have both been kind of inconsistent over their past few games and really inconsistent all year. So it's hard to tell who's going to win going into this game based on, somebody being hot or cold. They're both kind of streaky. So we're going to move on now to the key players for both teams. The key players for Dallas are Dak Prescott. He's their first guy. He is second in the NFL in passing yards with 4,334 this season. He's completing 65.5% of his passes. He has 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and a 99.3 passer rating. His QBR is 73.3, which is actually the third highest number in the league, only trailing Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Dak has had a pretty good season, especially statistically. Some of his stats have kind of been inflated by, garbage time, when they're down a lot of points to these teams like the Bills and the Bears, where, Dak gets a bunch of passing yards late, and the Cowboys still lose. But at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that he's up there in most every statistic for a quarterback this season, and he's in a contract year, so he's really had to show himself. And I think he's proved, outside of actually winning football games, he's proved that he can be a winning quarterback, a franchise quarterback. And so the next player for Dallas that is the key to winning this game is Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke has been the centerpiece of their offense since he was drafted as a rookie, 4th overall. This season he has 1,188 rushing yards at 4.4 yards per carry, and he has 11 rushing touchdowns. These are actually down numbers for Zeke because I think he's been a league leader in rushing yards in a season 2 or 3 times already in his young career. And so, this season, Zeke is at like 4th or 5th in rushing yards in the league, and he's kind of been slow a little bit to start the year. His longest run of the year is only like 35 yards, so he hasn't shown the same burst he has in previous years, but last week against the Rams, Zeke looked really good. He had over 100 yards. They really got the offense rolling, and he is kind of the focal point. When he gets going, the rest of the team gets going, and it makes it easier for Dak to throw. It makes the defense have better field positioning, so Zeke is really the key to this offense. And then the third player is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has 71 catches this season for 1,073 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's having a pretty great year. The Cowboys acquired him from the Oakland Raiders mid-season last year for a first-round pick in a trade, and Amari Cooper has been phenomenal ever since he became a Cowboy. He was struggling in Oakland before that, and then joined the Cowboys and just became one of the best receivers in the NFL. Unfortunately, he's had some struggles recently. A couple weeks ago against the Patriots, he had his first game in a Cowboys uniform where he didn't record a catch. And last week against the Rams, he only had 1 catch for 19 yards. But, they still managed to win 44-21 with this 1 catch. And another key thing here is the Eagles have one of the worst secondaries in the league. So Amari Cooper should really be able to exploit some weak matchups on the other side of the ball. Now, the 3 players that are key for the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game are Carson Wentz, Zach Ertz, and Miles Sanders. Let's start with Wentz. Wentz is their franchise quarterback. He's their guy. They've invested everything in him. They let Nick Foles walk and said, hey, Wentz is our guy over the offseason. We're sticking with him. And so far, it's kind of been a mixed bag. He has, I want to say, 12 fumbles this year. It's, kind of been ugly with some of those fumbles. And they've lost some bad games, like against the Dolphins. But at the same time, Wentz has stepped up in a lot of situations. He had a game-winning touchdown pass against the Giants. He had a go-ahead touchdown pass against the Redskins, and Wentz's receiving core has been very, very weak. I believe they were second or third in the league in dropped passes before Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar both got injured. Now he's at the point where his number one wide receiver is Greg Ward Jr., who was a ex-quarterback at the University of Houston and was released, I want to say, 6 times in the NFL before he finally, made it to a starting position with the Eagles. So Wentz has definitely had some poor talent around him, and he still managed to have 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 63.4% completion, 92.3 passer rating, and a 62.6 QBR, good for 8th in the league. So he's had some, shining moments, but at the same time, there have been some ugly turnovers and some bad losses, and the Eagles are really only 7-7. So he's been up and down. They're going to need a big game from Wentz if they want to get a W and make it to the playoffs. So the next player is Miles Sanders. He is their rookie running back at Penn State. Sanders has had some nice moments this year. He doesn't have a ton of gaudy stats because earlier in the year he was sharing snaps with Jordan Howard, who got injured. And Sanders on the season has 687 yards at 4.6 yards per carry with 2 touchdowns. And he's more of a big play guy. He's got a lot of speed. He's not like a bruising back who will take it up the middle 40 times a game. But, they're going to need Sanders to have some breakaway plays if they want to beat the Eagles. And then finally they have Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is probably going to be a Hall of Famer one day. He's a phenomenal tight end. He is kind of the key to their offense. He has 84 catches this season for 888 yards, 6 touchdowns. The Eagles run their passing attack through their 2 tight ends, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. And their receivers are a lot weaker, and so they're going to need Ertz to capitalize on a matchup with undersized safeties for the Cowboys like Jeff Heath and try to get him the ball a lot. So statistically, the Cowboys have an advantage over the Eagles. And in terms of key players, I would say the Cowboys probably have better players there too. But there are some other things that I want to talk about, that could give the Eagles a slight advantage in this game or could, give the Cowboys an even greater advantage. So I'm going to start off with something that would help the Cowboys, and that is Philadelphia's injury problem. They have just been devastated by injuries. Alshon Jeffrey, their leading receiver, he's done for the year. He's out. Their secondary has been decimated with injuries. They're starting guys who are, on the practice squad to start the season. Like I told you before, their number one receiver right now is Greg Ward Jr., who was an ex-quarterback. They've just been killed by injuries. And here's some of their guys who are fighting injuries right now. Nelson Aguilar, their receiver, Derek Barnett, defensive end, Lane Johnson, tackle, Brandon Brooks, guard, Fletcher Cox, defensive tackle, Ronald Darby, their corner, and Jordan Howard, their running back. All these guys are battling injuries, and that's not to mention the guys like Alshon Jeffrey, who's already done for the season. So Philly has struggled a lot with staying healthy. But at the same time, Dak Prescott, the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, injured his throwing shoulder against the Rams last week. And this is actually huge because he said he's going to play on Sunday against the Eagles. It's a big game. He wants to be in it. But, we don't know if he's going to be as good as he usually is. He actually said that he's not going to be throwing it all until Saturday. That's how bad it is. He didn't participate in practice today. He wasn't on the field. And he also has a hairline fracture in one of the fingers on his throwing hand. And the injury is to his throwing shoulder. So his throwing motion could be thrown off, which could cause the Cowboys to rely a lot more heavily on their ground game. And again, like I said, the Eagles' defense, they struggle a lot with defending the pass, and they're good at defending the run. And so if the Cowboys can only run the ball and they can't pass with Dak's injured shoulder, that could bode well for an Eagles victory. The third thing is Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett is coaching for his job at this point. Jason Garrett had super high expectations for the Cowboys going into the season. A lot of people picked them to win the Super Bowl, to make it to the Super Bowl, and they're 7-7 right now, having to battle with the Eagles to win the division. He is on the hot seat. If Jason Garrett loses this game, he will be out in Dallas. They'll fire him immediately. This guy has never made it to a conference championship game in 9 seasons, and Dallas has one of the most talented rosters in the NFL this year. So if he doesn't win this game, he's probably done. He's got to be motivated, inspired to win this game. Here's another stat. Jason Garrett, in his 9 seasons with the Cowboys, is 7-2 in Philadelphia. That's his record playing the Eagles in Philly. So that does bode well for a Cowboys victory. All right, the next thing that is huge for the Cowboys is the Cowboys and the Eagles already played this year, and Dallas just annihilated them. They beat them 37-10. The Eagles looked terrible. Wentz had like 1 touchdown, 1 pick. They only scored 10 points. The defense was just shredded. Ezekiel Elliott actually had a pretty nice game running all over them. And the Eagles they couldn't run with the Cowboys at all. Although I think this game will be a lot closer, and I think playing in Philly, which is a very hostile environment, will make it a lot harder for Dallas. Philly was actually more healthy in that game than they are now. They had fewer injured players back then, and they still lost 37-10. So again, that doesn't really point to an Eagles victory. So the next thing is some of Dallas's great stats that I talked about earlier in the videos are inflated due to garbage time. Like I mentioned before, some of these losses that they've had that have been close, like at Chicago where they lost 24-31, they were down 31-14 in that game. And then Dak Prescott threw for like 150 yards and a touchdown in the fourth quarter, which were kind of meaningless stats, because they couldn't actually come back and win the game. Against Buffalo, who they lost to 26-15, they were down 26-7 in the fourth quarter. Against the Jets, who they lost to 22-24, the Cowboys were down 21-3. And against the Packers, who the Cowboys lost to, they were down 31-10 in the fourth quarter. I think they came back and made it like a 1 or 2 score loss, but they were just getting crushed by all of these teams. And so a lot of their stats have been inflated, by throwing the ball a ton in the second half and getting like Amari Cooper against the Packers had something like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I want to say, even though they lost by, 10 points and they were down 21 points. And so those stats make the Cowboys offense look better than it actually has been. And then the final note I have for you guys is my prediction for the game. I think Dallas is going to win this game. I know that Philly, they've won 2 in a row against division opponents, and it's in Philly, which is a really tough place to play. But I just think Dallas's team is much more talented, especially with the injuries on Philadelphia's side of the ball. And Dallas crushed them earlier in the year. I think you just can't ignore that. Jason Garrett's coaching for his job. Dallas is the better team. The only big concern for me is Dak Prescott. I think he's the X factor in this game. If he is at a point where he really can't push the ball down the field, that gives the Eagles a huge advantage. But if Dak Prescott can play and is healthy, moderately healthy, he can do enough to get this team a win. I think Dallas wins this game. My prediction is Dallas 31, Philadelphia 24, which means Dallas wins and covers the 1.5 point spread as their favorites. Now, that's all we've got for tonight, folks. Comment below. Tell us what you think. Who's going to win, Cowboys or Eagles? Do you guys think either of these teams can make a run in the playoffs? Tell us below. Thanks for watching. I'm Scott Gebertz. This has been The Last Word.